UTEP. So Dean Payne has been a relatively short time at the institution, just a little bit longer than Dr. Wilson, but comes in with more than 30 years of experience in higher education, and had previously served as Dean of the J. Whitney Bunting College of Business at Georgia College and State University, had served as Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at the University of New Orleans, Interim Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Illinois State University, and Chair of the Department of Economics at Illinois State. And so for those of you not familiar with the academic trajectory, that literally is sort of every step working up the chain. And so Dr. Payne comes to this position recognizing a variety of different factors and different kinds of influences. And in the short time that he's been at the College of Business Administration at UTEP, a number of important milestones and benchmarks have been accomplished, and the college continues a very, very strong trajectory. Let me start with this question, Dean, because we've been talking about the intersections of leadership and different experiences, but given your field of study in economics and some of your interest in that area, the million-dollar question, I suppose, is with the pandemic ongoing, what's your best sense of what the economy is going to look like in these next couple of months?
Well, I think it's, I don't think you have to be an economist to understand what's going on. So I think most economists, by and large, realizes that when the data comes out for real GDP growth, that we're going to see a downturn. I think it's already started in the first quarter. You're going to see it more in the second, probably into the third quarter. Then going further out, I think the economists as a whole start to deviate a little bit in terms of how long this is going to unwind. I know a lot of states are moving towards opening up or phasing it in. So the big question is, in the short run, there might be some economic activity because everybody's been locked up for a period of time now. But the real question is, does the virus tend to spread? Accelerate the spread of the virus when you open up, and is that going to have detrimental effects on the economy in terms of all of a sudden the workforce becomes ill and so forth like this that impacts businesses? So that's the wild card, I think, for a lot of people looking out beyond the next quarter or two. And so that's a general snapshot, of talking to people and just getting a sense of things. So I wish I had a crystal ball, but I don't.
Sure, understood. In previous iterations where we've hit economic challenges, post 9/11 or during the Great Recession, education saw a surge in admissions, people deciding that they would go back to school, that this was an opportune time to try to do that. Do you sense that that's likely to happen this time as well, or do you think that that the economic ripple is going to be so wide that it may actually stop people from doing something like that?
Well, I think, because I've been thinking about this, I think there's two attributes to it, or two aspects of it. So on the one hand, when we had other episodes where we had an economic downturn, the modalities in terms of, education, you had both face-to-face and online. So now we're on, one of the modalities is kind of up for question given the circumstances of the pandemic. So right now we're looking more at online interface. And so that's a question for people, whether or not they want to explore educational opportunities through an online environment versus the face-to-face. So that's the first thing that's a little different than previous episodes where we had a downturn like in 2008 or after 9/11 and so forth. The other aspect is, I think it's created some disruption in higher education. Unfortunately, if you just keep track of your news feeds on your phone, or if you venture into the Chronicle of Higher Education, looking at, that's a trade publication for higher education, you'll see that there's going to be a ripple effects from this pandemic. Especially small private institutions are going to be struggling, and even a number of regional comprehensive universities are now approaching exigency status, whether financially. So it's going to vary across the country, but I think it's going to force universities to be thinking differently. So if they weren't thinking about online or being more in tune with how they deliver education. I think now this episode that we're experiencing now is really going to push the envelope for them to really think more strategically about what they do with online, realizing that people might be place bound, or the simple fact is that a lot of people trying to balance work-life aspects are going to be looking more at online education and quality online education, and not you know, a lot of things that are out there that maybe the quality is maybe not up to par in that regard. So those are two things that I see for higher education. So what we're doing in the College of Business, so some things that we have, and I just want to first start, there's a number of, for those that are looking to explore additional training, if you go, and it's been in place for some time, although it's not well marketed, to be honest with you. And this ties into, if I'm guessing, President Wilson, when she spoke earlier in this session, she probably mentioned the word upskilling. Is that something that maybe she mentioned? I'm just guessing because I've had a number of meetings with her, so I'm guessing she probably brought that up. So UTEP has a platform, and much of it's online, where the program is P3, but it's really the title of it is basically professional and public programs. It's run out of Extended University. It has a section of it, it's corporate and business training. So they have, if you check on the website, just go to www.ppp.utep.edu, and I'll be more than happy to send the link to David. He can distribute it. But you'll see a list of programs. So some are free informational seminars that you can you know, check out, and as well as there's a number of certifications that are provided that kind of align with on the corporate or business side. So those are some things that are there, some of which are free, some of which is a nominal fee for the certifications of the training. Also, for those that have families and trying to, I know it's kind of difficult to manage doing work at home. At the same time, you got young kids running around crazy. To balance that, they also have online, although it maybe not solve the problem with the kids going crazy, but maybe it'll calm them down a little bit. They have youth online camps too for this summer. So I encourage you kind of just check it out and see if there's anything there that might interest you. What we're doing in business, another thing that just started in February, and it's through the Mike Loya Center. So the College of Business works collaboratively with the College of Engineering and the Mike Loya Center for Innovation and Commerce. They launched this Studio G platform that is typically face-to-face, but they've moved it online. So again, if you go to another link here is www.utep.edu, Loya Center, Studio G. And if you look online, you will see there's online training information sessions. So if you're a budding entrepreneur or thinking about future opportunities in that regard, is that they will provide training sessions and so forth. So there's a whole suite of programs tied to that as well. So just two quick things I just want to alert you to that are in place that are available online. The other thing that we're working on for this summer with Prudential and ADP, what we call, it sounds bad, I hate the word boot camp, but they were adamant about having a financial services boot camp. And it's really preparation for the SIE exam for those that are in the finance industry. So that's going to be available. So more should be coming out from the College of Business on that front for this summer. We're just ironing out all the details of the Prudential and ADP. The other thing that we're doing, two other things we're doing in the college to kind of help. Again, we're servicing students that are part of UTEP, but we're also an economic driver in the community. One is that, and I don't know if President Wilson discussed the federal stimulus dollars that there's a tranche that runs through higher education through the UT system, and it goes out to all the universities. So we're getting stimulus money, and part of that is half of the amount that is initially coming in is directly supporting students that are enrolled in UTEP. Another tranche of this is coming out, they're called CARES, And part of what we're doing, we're trying to figure out how we can do this, because a lot of students sometimes, because of the economic situation, have maybe lost their jobs uh, or looking at internships opportunities that all of a sudden rolled up because the companies can't, they're really trimming their budgets in light of the current situation. So we're trying to use some of these monies through an internship program to help for those internships that typically students would have, but really pay for them ourselves rather than have the companies pay for the internships. And so we're in the process of working through that right now. So I don't know how fast that's going to unfold, but that's one piece that we're working on through our Career Center in the College of Business, or through actually the University Career Center, but we're one part of it. The other piece that I think that we're doing internally for the College of Business to help students, because again, students, most of the students at UTEP are working 20, 30, even 40 hours a week and trying to balance a heavy course load, is that we're looking at the students in going into the fall, continuing students. So we're going to be rolling out in the next couple of weeks out of the College of Business. We went and started looking at our endowment accounts, trying to carve out resources from those endowment accounts to package or put together a scholarship. We haven't branded it yet, but we'll go COVID-19 Continuing Student Scholarship, whatever we come up with at the name. But we're going to have some criteria. Basically, we have a limited amount of money, but we'll have some, parameters around students' good standing, a certain GPA, to encourage them to register for the fall. So what we're seeing right now, talking about education, is the summer enrollments for the university are up relative to last year. And in the College of Business, that's true as well. But the numbers looking out for the fall are a few percent below where we were tracking last year. So for us, for the College of Business, we're going to try to, on the margin, try to encourage students through the scholarship campaign we're putting out here in the next couple of weeks, to encourage students to register for the fall, to kind of offset some of the costs that they might incur given the situation that we're in. But those are just a few things that we're working on.
Let me change tax just a little bit, Dean, and ask this question, since this is a group of leaders on a trajectory. At this point, you've held a number of positions in the university system, and I'm wondering if you might share with us the most significant leadership skill or the most significant tool that you've sort of brought to bear in this particular job, or maybe as you've picked up along the way. I mean, what really sticks out in your mind that's been a kind of linchpin experience or a linchpin lesson that you now are sort of using in this new position as dean?
Yeah, I think so. I've been I jokingly call I'm a utility infielder. I've covered a lot of different administrative roles. So what I've learned, and part of this is just training as an economist, I guess, that maybe gives me some comparative advantage in some things. But in higher education, there's different institutions, right? So universities have different missions, different size, scope of what they do, different stakeholders and everything. And so I've been fortunate to be at some pretty good, solid footing institutions that they're really grounded. They understand how they operate, very good shared governance structure of how they operate. And then I just been in situations where because there's circumstances where I call it change management, and sometimes the change management is it's not you have a choice. So you have to make the change, or the other side of the coin is not going to be very pleasant. And so I've been in situations where I think the biggest thing, and I think search firms that have contacted me on things, it's always around change management, or it's around how do I turn a financially dire situation around just to get some level of stability. Unfortunately, that's kind of been I've been in several situations where that takes place. And so with that, I think the biggest thing is, the first thing I think sometimes is being able to educate people of why you need to change. And it's not just because Jim says we need to change, but there's underlying forces that are driving the change to really educate, spend time answering questions from people to understand that, especially in higher education now, there's a lot of disruption. A lot of it is through technology, a lot of disruption in public institutions because state support's been declining. How do you look for alternative revenue sources? How do you be more cost effective? How do you control increasing tuition? You know, all these factors come to play. And I think the first thing is, that I think is important is being able to listen, make the case for why you need to change, be able to incorporate feedback from people when they understand that need, to get them to buy into the, you know, the need for change going forward to strengthen the institution and hopefully make life more stable than being in a financial situation with the institution that makes it very rocky, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. So I think that's the biggest thing, is understanding change management and understanding how to implement changes. And more importantly, in order to implement changes to have buy-in, you really need to spend some time up front educating people and listening to them and their feedback on how to institute changes. So that's, I think, one thing that's in several of my positions has been a common theme.
So moving from that, and then thinking about some of the bigger picture on leadership. I mean, the example that comes to mind is the book Too Big to Fail. And so as this last economic crisis was unfolding, we recognized and saw different institutions that really had worked themselves into kind of a point of no return. What is your perspective in terms of training leaders to not just anticipate some of those the direction of some of the economy, but also, I mean, how do you become more efficient, whether there's a pandemic afoot or if you're just thinking strategically about what happens in the next 5-year window or the next 10-year window?
Yeah, so I think you actually had a lot in that question. So let me try to dissect it a little bit. I don't want to go down the too big to fail route, but in terms of, I think sometimes people need to be, I mean, there's a short-term, immediate run, right? What do you got to do today? And then there's a short run, and then you move out further in the long run. So I think in higher education, I think it's important to not just focus on the immediate run, right? You need to kind of look out and kind of go through scenarios. So for instance, one thing that was early on, and I credit the president for this, at the university I was working at, he would have these brainstorming sessions. He says, let's think about what things will look like 10 to 15 years out. And so what he would do, the first thing is he'd bring in a demographer of all people, and we'd look at population trends to you'd be cross-eyed by the time you finish the session. And just going through and talking about those kind of projections, which for higher education is very important. You need to understand what's changing in the population, both in student demographics, and then you work backwards saying, okay, well, what do we have in our programs, our array of programs that the university offers? How many are really in sync for what's going to be needed 10 to 15 years out? And so you can look at projections of looking at what industries or how they're evolving, look at the demographic changes. You shouldn't just look at it and say, oh, that's great, that's wonderful. But you need to use that information to inform what you're doing today. Because once you start having those discussions, you quickly, among a group, will get a consensus on where your strengths and weaknesses are. and it's prudent to be thinking or planning around strategically where your weaknesses are, how we can correct those. And in some cases, you make decisions about, yeah, we don't need to be doing that anymore. Let's just focus. And I think the biggest thing with those kind of conversations, it really makes you focus on where your comparative advantage is as an institution. And same thing applies for a company. You see it with companies all the time. All of a sudden they're doing well, and all of a sudden they start buying up. We're going to go venture in this industry. We're going to go venture in over here. And they're just just venturing out beyond their expertise or scope in the long run. Sometimes they run into problems along those lines. With financial institutions, too big to fail, the problem there is is that, well, unfortunately, they have to work through Congress, which is a totally different thing in terms of some of the legislation. They kind of drive it a little bit, which is maybe not for the betterment of the average person on Main Street in terms of how financial innovation takes place in that regard. But
do you think, Dean, that the trends that you're seeing, both in terms of education, the displacement or the disruption to move towards technology, do you think that the students that, for example, that your college produces or that business schools are producing, do you think that they're fleet of foot to adjust with those kinds of changes, or do you find there to be shortfalls? I mean, do you feel comfortable with sort of the broad sense of how business schools are working right now?
yeah, so I think more what's happening with business schools, I think, is several things. So that one, they always have to be cognizant of, and this is talking to people in industry. So, our consumers, in some sense, the employers, they need to be more cognizant of what's the value added for business education, right? Because I think employers, what ultimately they're looking for when you talk to an employer, they're looking for skill sets. And some of them are very much a good liberal arts education is a valuable skill set that sometimes people in business schools don't pay attention to, but I can tell you that employers pay attention to it. Oral and communication skills, quantitative reasoning, the ability to be a lifelong learner. Everybody hears that a lot, but the fact is what employers are looking for, employers are trying to gauge what is going to be evolving in their industry. And how can our workforce evolve with it? And they're looking for people because they don't mind. I think they see the importance of education and training along the way, but they also want someone to be able to adapt because, 5 years, I can't project what the jobs are going to look like 5 years from now, even the type of jobs. Things are changing so much. I mean, 15 years ago, social media marketing was probably not as prominent as it is today, or digital marketing. Right? So all these jobs are evolving. So they're looking for employees that can adapt, have an intellectual curiosity, are willing to take on new challenges, to keep upskilling, improving their skill set, or move their skill set in a certain direction. Sometimes within higher education, the problem is it's almost a mismatch. So that the rate of change in industry is so fast. And I think one thing that higher education has to come to terms with is they need to be moving quicker than they typically do. Higher education, I joke with colleagues, I say, we're like the dinosaur sometimes. We just don't adapt. I'm not sure this with President Wilson, we just don't move very quickly. And by the time we're responding to something, it's something else is already, moving ahead. So we're almost lagging behind. And part of that is trying to get faculty to understand adaptability. They need to be more fluid in what they're doing, getting faculty understand change. That's, from my vantage point, that's sometimes the most difficult, is getting faculty to understand the necessity of change. Not saying that they're not current, but the ability to think differently or to adapt what they're doing for a different audience or a different platform like online, et cetera. That's sometimes a challenge. I'm not picking on UTEP. That's every place I've worked for 30 years. That's the constant. So. But that's the thing I see. I think if you talk to industry, it's really interesting because even folks in industry, we have corporate academies with ADP and Prudential Financial and Lockheed Martin, and we're talking with Lockheed Martin. Again, they face the same thing. They say they're looking out there. It's like, man, people in our industry are changing, and all of a sudden they're saying we're not changing fast enough, and we talk about why they're slow in responding in certain areas, and so they face the same challenges. It's just they're moving at a faster pace than we are. And so the one thing that's really helped us is this corporate academy structure for the faculty to see, because we have an interaction with industry to see the need for change. And so I think there's an importance for business schools to be more engaged with industry, not just superficially, but in terms of the curriculum. So that's something I think it's doable. It's just making sure that I think that helps facilitate the change that we need.
Excellent. Well, Dean, thank you. We've taken a block of your precious Friday afternoon, and I know that for leadership, this is a great experience, and it's always nice to see you in these spaces. But thank you very much, Dean. We appreciate it.